All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for being with us tonight. If you're in your home or your car or your bedroom or bathroom, I don't know.
That's good.
Where else would somebody be?
At the
You're in the
church.
park.
At the church? Hey, if you're here in the church, hey, if you're here in the church, just tell them what's up.
What's good?
What's good?
What up?
So wherever you are, we're glad that you are joining us tonight because we are continuing our conversation about what it means to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. The past 2 weeks we've talked about, or the past couple weeks, we've talked about those first two, and tonight we are talking about what it means to do what Jesus did. And I've really enjoyed these conversations because they're so practical. It's funny because oftentimes in church we get into a church service and we have a conversation about a really spiritual topic, and we want it to be like really impactful and really good and really emotional and stuff, and it's great. But then we wake up the next day and we're like, all right, what was that thing you said? Like, how do I do that? So I think that that's a really good thing for trying to help people understand why we should be passionate about these things. So I want to give a really emotional, fired up, passionate message to help you see why you should do whatever I'm telling you to do or whatever I'm telling you the Bible says to do. But for conversations like this, we've referred to this night as kind of like the dinner table of the youth ministry, right? We get here and we have deep, meaningful conversations about practically what it means to live out your faith. And I think these have been very great. So I'm excited to go into the third thing tonight. And I told you guys before, and I'll tell you again for everybody watching online, I just want to let you know that tonight there's a lot more than normal because we're going to go through the third thing. We're going to go through what the Bible lays out as the practices of how we should do what Jesus did. And there's a lot of just stuff in here that we really can't unpack all tonight, which is actually good because we're going to recap at the end of tonight all of the past three things. And then starting next week, we're going to start back at the beginning and go through be with Jesus, if that's our first thing, then of prayer and Sabbath and worship and all these things, we're going to go into each one and go in depth. And if we go through 2 or 3 a night, well, that's great. But I feel like it's just going to be so impactful for us to focus on these things over the next few weeks. So does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sick. All right. Okay, so be in the chat. So take some notes and ask really great. Ask some great questions. Ask some great questions when the time comes. Golly. Okay, so for tonight, like I said, we're talking about do what Jesus did. So really, it's going to answer the question, how do we live like Jesus? Like we see Jesus' life in the Bible, all throughout the scriptures, and we see that he did some really crazy stuff, and it was really awesome. And it's great, but how do we live like he lived? There are some very key things that Jesus did multiple times throughout his story in his life when he was here on earth. And we're going to pull a few of those key elements out. So if you go through your own, which I would encourage you to do throughout the week, if you go through the Gospels, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those books in the New Testament are all the same story, just told 4 different ways. So I don't know if y'all know that or not, but that's what those books are. So those are the 4 Gospels, and they tell the story of Jesus' life. You can go through and read those books for yourself, and you can pull these things out, and you can say, wow, he did this a lot, and this a lot, and this a lot, and he did this a lot, and you can kind of pull those things out. So we're going to start talking about those things tonight. Okay, you ready? You got notes ready?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. The very first thing that we can do to live like Jesus lived. First practice. I'm trying to get the suspense going, the first practice is eating and drinking. Y'all ain't got a clue. Y'all are just like, what are you talking about? Eating and drinking, what do you mean? The history of the church is around the table, is around the dinner table. It's kind of the heart behind why we have said, Wednesday nights for us, kind of like our dinner table for the youth ministry. We get together, we talk about these things, we bring up hard conversations if we need to, and, we just talk about it. The history of the church is around the table. For hundreds of years, this is where the people of Jesus met. They didn't meet in a church building, they met around the dinner table. They met around food and drink, and multiple times throughout the Bible, you see Jesus going to eat and drink with sinners. And people were so upset about it. They just couldn't understand. But there's something about community that happens at the dinner table, and it's so it's so impactful throughout the story of Jesus, which is interesting because how many of you, that's true for your family? Like you don't eat by yourself. Like your family's like, no, we are sitting down and we are eating at the dinner table every night. How many of you that's true? Raise your hand. Okay. That's really good. That's a lot more than I thought, actually. My family always, okay, now I'm going to ask the second question. More people might relate to this. And everybody online, if this is true for you, then put it in the chat. How many people, your family always said that, but y'all never did it? I would pretty much be in that group. They'd be like, we got to have a family dinner. Let's do it. And we would do it like Sunday and then like the next Sunday. Like we wouldn't do it throughout the week. I mean, we'd be at football practice or, jobs or whatever, and you just kind of be spread out all over the place and you really just couldn't do it. But it's funny because I remember the times where my family was gathered. So I remember Thanksgiving. I remember Christmas. I remember those things where we were sitting around the dinner table. I actually have a video of my pawpaw. It was, I didn't know it at the time, but I was so captivated by this moment, and I didn't really know why at the time. I know why now after seeing these principles of Jesus. But there is such a community and unity in your family when you gather together, you're eating, you're drinking, you're doing that together. There's something about that. And I didn't really understand it in the moment, and I saw my pawpaw. He would always pray for us at Thanksgiving and dinner. He was kind of the spiritual patriarch of my family, and he started this prayer, and everybody is sitting around the family. Everybody's there together. Nobody's gone. It's the one time we're all there together in community in that moment. And I'm taking this video because I just kind of took a step back and I was like, I want to remember this moment. I took a video of it. And little did I know at the time that was the last time that I would ever be with my family at the dinner table with my pawpaw praying for us. Because he would pass away a few months later, And that video to me is just so impactful. But I don't think it's the video. I think it's the memories of we grew up around the dinner table doing that at holidays, and that was kind of the big thing, right? So we'll get more into that. Like I said, we'll dive into that stuff. But just so you guys know, eating and drinking, that's the first thing. The church history, it developed around the table. The house church idea, it wasn't people pulling up rows of churches and putting it in somebody's backyard. When they were talking about house church, they meant they sat down together, they ate, they had communion together, they talked about life together. Okay. Prayer is the second one. Prayer, if you remember, was from the first week, right? So that's one of the primary ways that we can be with Jesus, but it's also one of the primary ways that we can do what Jesus did. Because prayer works multiple ways. It works with your intimacy, with your relationship with Christ, and then it's also a warfare that happens. I'm going to pray so I can win the spiritual battle that's happening over my life, right? So prayer is the center point of life with God. It should be woven into the fabric of our morning routine, our weekly schedule, and I would say that there's a saying that we used to use fairly often, which is pray first. Like anytime you go into anything, it's worth your time to pray first. You go into a class, pray first. You go into a conversation with somebody, pray first. You go home, you pray first. You go to work, you pray first. I mean, literally, and Jonathan, this is so good. I don't think I've ever seen this or heard this before, but Jonathan, a few weeks ago on Sunday, he talked about breath prayers. That was so good. Man, it was so good because I feel this pressure of if I'm going to go home, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to go if it's something extravagant, I'm going to go speak on stage on Sunday or something, or if I'm just going to go into this hard conversation that nobody's ever going to see, both ways I'm going to pray first, right? And it's funny because we feel this pressure of we have to do this really strong, lengthy prayer, and it's got to be great. It could be as simple as I'm walking into that room and all I'm saying is, God help me, I really need you right now. Yeah. And that's it. Mm-hmm. That was the breath prayer. And the breath prayer, for those of you who didn't see Jonathan's message, is a prayer that you can say in one breath. It's just, God, I need you. God, help me. God, guide me. God, I know you're with me. Help me see it. It's so simple, but it's so good. Gosh. Okay, the third thing, we're getting a little into it now. Okay, the third thing is healing the sick. Healing the sick. Healing the sick. We'll just leave that like it is. Healing the sick. We'll get into that. There's a lot. Okay, number 4. Let's move on. Teaching the way. Teaching the way. So back before Christianity was called Christianity and it was just Jesus, and they weren't They weren't thinking about that stuff. You know, it was just, oh, there's Jesus, I'm following Jesus. It was called the way before it was called Christianity, because it just wasn't a thing yet, right? I don't know. So I don't know exactly why. I mean, it was actually, it's in the Bible. It's recorded the first time that someone ever, it literally says at this point, this is when people started calling them Christians, because they were like Christ, and it was like mini Christs, mini Christians, right? And so it started there, but before that moment, it was called the way. Like, oh, this is the way. You know, it's not from the Mandalorian. It's from the Bible. Okay, so teaching the way. So Jesus literally said his last commandment as he left the earth was, go and make disciples. And he even said, not in that section, but he even told his disciples, he said, as you have freely received, you must freely give. And so that's a big part of teaching the way. Think about it. If we go back to what we just said, eating and drinking with people. Think about how much time Jesus gave away to people. People sucked time out of Jesus. I mean, they were just like needy. I need you to heal this person. I need to hear what you're saying. I need to understand you, whatever. Jesus always was giving out to people. But it's like this reciprocal thing, because he gave out to his disciples every dumb question that Peter asked. He was like, all right, you know, let's talk about this again. And he just gave and gave and gave. And which is good, because that allows us to, we receive. But Jesus is saying, as you freely receive, you must freely give. Which means that as we're inviting people to come and eat and drink with us and pray with us, that we need to do that freely. And not to say like, man, this person's just eating up my time. Like, I'm not having another phone call conversation with them. You know, it's like, no, like, freely give as you freely receive it. Like, received. Yeah, receive it. How many times has God talked to you about the same thing? And forgiven you the same thing? Whatever. You know, it's like, man, I got to do that for this person. You know, freely give as you have freely received. Okay, teaching the way. There's a lot about that, because basically everything that we're talking about is teaching the way, and everything that we're about to talk about is teaching the way. But what I would say is that I think the most important thing to take away from this idea of teaching the way or making disciples is showing people what it looks like with the way that you live your life, and not just telling them all the right things. Right? So I don't want to just tell people what to do. I want to show them what it's like when you do it and when God blesses it with my life. Like, I want to live it out. I want to live a blessed life, a life of favor and intimacy with God. And you see that and you're like, man, I want to follow you as you follow Christ. Like, that's what Paul kind of charged the church with. Okay, and then the next thing, what is this, 5? 5? Okay, number 5. Preaching the gospel. Got to preach the gospel. It's fairly simple. You just got to preach the gospel. For some of us, that looks different depending on what we do with our lives. Vocationally, like for your job in the future, that'll look different depending on what you do. But regardless, you got to preach the gospel. Never stop speaking truth into people's lives. Number 6, peacemaking. Peacemaking. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. In every situation, that should be true. Seeking how you can bring that about. We'll talk a lot more about that again. I mean, we're going to dive a lot into these in the future. But I'm just giving you so you can have like bullet point notes. Peacemaking. What was that, 6? Yeah. I got to keep up. Number 7, doing justice. Doing justice. We've seen a lot of there's all these different separations, but culturally, like racially, gender equality, like all these different things over the past like 2 to 3 years that have kind of blown up. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because the church, this is kind of like what I was preaching about on Sunday, but like the church sometimes can look at that and be like, man, why is our generation just so whack, bro? Like, what they doing? But it's like, no, like for us, we have to take responsibility as the church and say, we have to do a better job at showing people what it's like to bring about justice in a godly way, right? Like, we have to figure out what that looks like for us and see how Jesus did that and then do it the way that Jesus did, right? So doing justice, and I think it's something that marks this generation. Like, I think that justice and the pursuit of said justice is something that is very intentional by God that was placed in this generation, because we don't look at injustice and just let it pass by. Like, it irks us. It's like, I can't leave that alone. That's got to be fixed, you know? And I think that's very intentional by God for what he's going to do in this generation. But, again, we'll talk about that later. Okay, number 7?
Yep.
Hey, number 7. Number 7 is prophesying. Prophesying. We don't talk about this stuff every day. This is good. Prophesying. Prophesying. I'm just like, anybody need to know how to spell that? You got it?
No.
Prophesying. Prophesying. Ing. I-N-G. Here's the thing about prophesying that I'll just touch on this and we'll move on. Prophesying is not something that should be this like mystical, weird thing, right? So it's like, I don't know. Maybe you've never been around people who talk about prophesying and it comes across as this like weird like wizard thing, you know? It's like, that ain't what it's like. So literally, breaking down prophecy into its very most simple terms is the Bible. This is a good illustration, actually. So the Bible, you can think of it as a constant stream of God's thoughts about your life. Jeremiah 29:11. Anybody know that one? Right, there you go. You got it. It's all right. It's all right. You got it. So that Psalm 139. You know me. I was formed in your room. The womb. Ephesians 2:10. I'm a masterpiece. Like, God created me perfectly. Right. So there's all these different truths in the Bible about your life. Prophesying is just grabbing one of those thoughts and just giving it to somebody. Saying, hey, did you know that you perfectly and wonderfully made? There's nothing wrong about you, Caesar. There's nothing wrong about you, Amira. There's nothing that anybody could say to you, Abby, that would discount God's love for you. Like, that was easy, right? So it's literally like God, I think, is very intentional sometimes to just bring about a word, a verse, a truth in here and just highlight it for somebody. And it's as simple as that. Now, how you deliver it, that's just up to you. You know what I'm saying? Okay. All right, so number 8. You ready?
Yes, sir.
We kind of talked about it before. It's a little bit different, though. Number 8, standing up against religious and political corruption. I'm going to just leave that there. Standing up against religious and political corruption. If you don't remember, I'll remind you that Jesus was not a fan of because God's a God of authority, right? And when people abuse that authority, it don't sit very well with God, right? And God gets kind of upset with it. And God, when he came into the temple and saw that people were abusing the authority that was given to them, if I remember correctly, he flipped some tables, he whipped some people out, like, whipped, like threw a rope together and just slung that thing. So Jesus a little wild, bro. You know, like, Jesus got some thug in him, and it's good. So I think that there's a lot to take away from that idea, but it's a lot of really good stuff because it shows that that God is so passionate about protecting the authority that he has set up. And when you come under godly authority, it's just that much better, right? So there's a whole conversation about that. My goodness. But that's the 8 for Do What Jesus Did. We're at 7:49, which means that we're going to take a little break. We're going to ask some questions. So hopefully you've been thinking of some questions. Online, if you have any questions, then put them in the chat. We're looking at them. And after we do questions, I'm going to go back and I'm going to fly through the first 2 in case you're new here this week or in case you're new here online. I'm going to go through the first 2, and then we're going to pick up next week with the first thing of the first Be With Jesus. Right? The first thing of the first thing. Right. We'll figure it out. All right. First, anybody have any questions about all that we just talked about? Yes, Andrew.
So the Bible says, and Jesus says constantly, like, submit to authority.
Right.
So how do we know when it's our responsibility to stand up against corruption and authority?
Fantastic question. What a great question. Here's the answer. The answer is, and let me just preface this by saying that y'all ask really good questions sometimes, and I'm not going to pretend to know every answer. So if I don't know an answer, I'm going to be like, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to go read and get back to you, okay? And I'll actually even put it back on you a little bit to say, like, let's go read together. You tell me what you got. I'll tell you what I got. You know what I mean? But for that answer, I know what the answer is. For that question, that's a great question. A lot of people have been asking that question over the past year or so, if you could imagine. So here's the thing. You respect authority for sure. It's exactly what, I mean, you see it all throughout the Bible. You see it in the book of Daniel. How do you live a stand-up life in a bow-down culture? How do you do that, right? So that's the book of Daniel. You look at the life of Jesus, and they kind of asked him that question, like, what about the whole Caesar thing? And like, aren't we supposed to pay taxes to Caesar, but we're supposed to give it to God too? And literally Jesus says, well, give to Caesar what's Caesar's. That's not mine. That's his. Go give it to him. I don't care. But give to God what's God. Yeah. And so there's that whole separation between, okay, you live here on earth, but you answer to a God that is way higher than that authority, right? So what does that look like? Well, practically how that plays out is you submit to authority. If authority ever asks you to do something that contradicts God's word, because then you've broken authority, right? It's as simple as that. So if God's authority, and God has set up authority, because God, it literally says in the Bible that God chooses who he places, where he places. Now, if that authority at any point in time says, hey, I'm here, you're going to do something that breaks the authority of this authority that I answer to, well, I ain't. That's like this. Great example. I feel like God just gave me, thank you, I got you. You have an older brother, right? Jordan.
Yep.
Okay? Let's say that your daddy tell you to do something. And then Jordan comes up and says, hey, I don't think that's a good idea, bro. You know what I'm saying? I just don't think it's a good idea. Who you answering to?
Dad.
Right. Because that's your daddy, right? That's my daddy. I ain't answering to you if you tell me to do something against what my daddy said, right? So anyway, I think that's just a very easy way to kind of put that in simple terms. But those two stories are great stories to go and find out more about, a little bit more practical, like what that looks like. Yeah, it's good. Because Daniel still served in the kingdom.
Right.
But he still prayed to God. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyway, that's a great question. Great question. Anybody else?
Sean got a question in the chat.
Who what?
Sean in the chat.
Sean's got a question in the chat. Come on, Sean. What is it?
He said, is it wrong for Christians to have a combat job in the military? And he says, is that peacemaking in the sense of protecting peace for others, or is that creating violence?
That's really good.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that like David killed like 10,000 people. So I mean, like, no.
That's defense, man.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that when you start answering questions like that, it gets real personal to your personal convictions. Because you do look at examples like the Old Testament examples of David and Saul and all these guys who like they were conquerors and like they went by the power of God and slayed people. You look at Samson; that boy killed people with a jawbone. You know what I'm saying? Like you look at that. But then you see this entire flip of the Christian world when God comes onto the scene and he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." But then there's also this fight for justice. Like, how do you do that? And I think that how you do that, and I think this is credit to Jonathan Stutz because he asks me this very often. But I think you want to ask yourself, why are you doing what you're about to do? So you got to know the why. Any important decision in your life, you should always ask that question. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? Just why? And if you have a really good why, well, you can go to the next question. And I think as you start to kind of filter through these questions of like filtering through, God, what are you calling me to do? What's the next right thing for me to do? There's plenty of people that have gone to the military and said, I feel like you've called me into the military. I think I'm supposed to go fight for my country, but it doesn't look like what other people might look like, right? So it's like you see this kind of balance there, and there's plenty of people that have done that and have said, like, I'm not picking up a gun. You know, like they made a whole movie about it. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of different things in there. I think you definitely want to settle that why though. You want to settle that why for sure, and then you want to ask, just having a conversation with God and saying like, what's the next right thing for me to do? Like, what's the next right thing? And obviously there's a lot that goes into your personal convictions with that. But there's nothing in the Bible, I think, that says you shouldn't, or you should, like you should be like going fighting and that kind of thing. It's like, you know, it's just, it can be really difficult. But like I've said with lots of questions over the past few weeks, is that the number one thing that I think that is true for every question is that you should not answer it by yourself. So I think that, so for Sean specifically, I think that, you know, throughout the process of him figuring out where he's going, what he's doing, he's got to be talking to somebody. So Sean, like I know you're watching, and I know you're in 252 this summer. So for us to have ongoing conversations about that, I think is huge. And I think that's true for anything that you decide in life. Okay, that's good. Next question? Yes.
How do you stand up for political beliefs without alienating the other side and potentially ruining a chance for a relationship with them?
That's a good question. I think that what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say if you do it well, then you do it this way. Maybe I do want to say that. Because I can't think of a time where you don't do this way and you do it well. But I think it's kind of like giving feedback. If you give feedback to somebody and or like saying no. So oftentimes when, oh my gosh, there's so much wrapped up in this answer. Jeez. Okay, so when you tell someone no, if you tell the idea no and not the person, it goes a lot better. Mm-hmm. You can say no to an idea, but still say yes to the person. Right. So that's key one to keep in mind. And the second thing to keep in mind is that it is a lot easier if both people, this rarely happens, and this is what is very difficult, but it goes a lot easier if both people decide to clothe themselves with Jesus over their cultural preferences. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like I talked about on Sunday, is that like, if I can see past all of whatever this is and see you, then that's great. Again, like we just said, I would ask why. Like, why am I having this conversation? Is it to change how this person behaves or believes? If that's true, then I'm not having the conversation. If it is because they're trying to figure out like, hey, I see this, but then I see this in the Bible, and I don't know, like, am I voting for politically aligned beliefs? Like, you know, if it's that kind of thing, good, let's talk about it. You know, but if it's like I'm trying to have somebody change their political party, well, why am I doing that? Like, I don't. You know, I want to connect into Jesus and believe that Jesus is going to reveal to them what they should be doing and how they should, you know, how they're growing. They're going to become more like Jesus. So there's those three big things that are wrapped up in that. But I think that, you know, you want to make sure you want to know why you're having the conversation. If it's for a behavior change or opinion change, don't have the conversation. But if it is something that you think could benefit them in their relationship with Christ, then you can have the conversation, you can give your opinions, you can say yes to the person and not the belief or the opinion. But then again, like I said, it's always going to go better if you choose to clothe yourself with Jesus and not your political opinion, your cultural divides, you know. That's often just extremely difficult. So, gosh, there's a lot there, but in a sense, that's it. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, it's 7:59. Oh my goodness. Okay, really quick. Here we go. Let's go. Oh gosh. All right, really quick. I'm gonna fly through it. You ready? Be with Jesus. How do you be with Jesus? Silence and solitude. Sabbath. Prayer. Fasting. Bible reading. Go through it one more time. Silence and solitude. Sabbath, prayer. I can hear y'all tapping on your phones. Fasting and Bible reading, which means that next week we're going to start off our conversation with silence and solitude, which y'all don't know nothing about. It's going to be so good. Oh, man, it's going to be good. Okay, so that's be with Jesus, become like Jesus. Dealing with your past. Gosh, that's going to be a good one. Discovering your identity and calling, forgiving as we have been forgiven, community, simple living, embrace grieving and loss, develop a rule of life. Y'all are good. I'll do it again. Do it again. Okay, dealing with your past.
I feel like I should just press the
mean,
voice
you have them
text.
from
but-
You could. Yeah, you could. Dealing with your past, discovering your identity and calling, forgiving as we have been forgiven, community, simple living, embrace grieving and loss, and develop a rule of life. You good? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then you just got everything that I just gave you, right? So you should be good, at least for today. Let's just hope. Let's just hope you're good. So hopefully today also spurred a lot of questions. Like there's things like healing and prophecy and like all these different things that are just kind of like, how many of y'all expected me to say eating was the first like.
No, I'm fine.
Tyrone said, "God bless my food." So yeah,
I can always eat.
always eating. So there's some unique practicality and significance behind all those things that we're going to dive into over the next however many weeks, and I'm very excited about it because there's nothing more that I would rather be spending time on than helping you guys figure out what it means to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. Right? All right. That's it.
It's good.
All right.
Yes, sir.
See you guys online next week or in person. I'm looking at you, Andrew Maddox. I'm looking. Oh, just called him out. Just called him out.
He ain't even watching right now.
Oh gosh. Oh man. All right. Are we good?
Yes,
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.